Welcome, and we'll start first by asking for the roll call. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Management Committee. I will go down the list of members alphabetically. Please unmute and indicate if you are present. Don Prince for Patrick Banger. Jeffrey Barton.
Here.
Jean Blackman. Christopher Brady.
Here.
Thank you. Chief Les Brown. Chair Andrew Ching.
Present.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Here.
Thank you. Kathleen Curley. Philip Dorchester. Crystal Dykes.
Here.
Thank you. Carrie Dyrek. Jeff Graves for Lisa Garcia.
Here.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson for Director Halikowski.
Here.
Thank you. Rick Horst. Jennifer Jack. Julie Cairns.
Here.
Julie Cairns.
Here.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Here.
Thank you. John Cross.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Here.
Thank you. Leo Liu. Reyes Medrano. Jessica Mefford Miller. Dave Trimble for Grady Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Here.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Here.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Here.
Thank you. Matt Busby for Bryant Powell.
Present.
Thank you. Joy Rich. Bill Murphy for Jim Thompson.
Here.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Here.
Thank you. Catherine Valenzuela. Matthew Williams.
Here.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. A virtual meeting of the MAG Management Committee is now called to order. For all of you participating via Zoom, which is all of us today because we're fully virtual, remember to unmute your device before speaking and set it to mute when you're not speaking to create a positive experience for all members. If you are participating by phone, you should use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise your hand. At this time, could you please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? I'll go ahead and start. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we'll move to item 3 is call to the audience. Members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for that meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not action. Staff, have we received any public comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for the call to the audience or any other item on the agenda today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We close item 3 and now we move on to item 4 on the agenda, Executive Director's Report. MAG Executive Director Eric Anderson will provide the report.
Thank you, Chairman Chang. If we go to the next slide. So on May 4th, this is the signing of the general fund appropriation for Interstate 10 widening between Phoenix and Casa Grande. Appropriates $400 million in general fund money for this section. That's combined with MAG has 200 million plus allocated to this project out of Prop 400 funds. And then ADOT's competing for the $300 million in a mega grant funding proposal out of the IIJA. So what happened on the 400 million was that was going to be part of the budget package, but because of the delay in the budget, ADOT wanted to make sure that the appropriation happened, and so working behind the scenes with many of the stakeholders involved in this project, the 400 million was pulled out of the budget process and put in a separate appropriation. So totally great moment. You'll see Governor Lewis and the Gila River Indian community. The Gila River Indian community have been great partners on this project, and Mayor Harkey as chair of TPC. Go to the next slide. Another great occasion here on May 20th, the opening of the Valley Metro Modern Streetcar. Some delays because of the COVID and some of the delays, supply chain issues. It's a hybrid streetcar, travels 14 stops and connects to the Valley Metro light rail stations at the two locations, one at Dorsey and the other in downtown Tempe. This project was also supported by $87 million in regional funds, including about $76 million of Prop 400 money. So again, Prop 400 money actually making things happen here in the Valley. You go to the next slide. So one of the activities we've had ongoing here over a number of years is Age Friendly Arizona. Amy St. Peter has been leading that effort. FDA recently approved new toolkits for the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center. And very happy to say that the coordinating committee toolkit that we used here in Arizona, developed here in Arizona, was recognized as one of the best practices. So once again, Arizona's efforts here in addressing some of these important transportation issues are recognized nationally. Go to the next slide. And then Monday, we had a press conference. Monday, June 6th, was Secure Your Load Day. You'll see Mayor Weiss there shaking hands with the DPS colonel. Mayor Weiss shared a personal story about his wife's in their minivan towing a camper, hitting a ladder on I-17. So really personalized the story, really appreciated that. The Mesa police officer there on the right side of the screen actually was also the victim of debris hitting the windshield of his patrol car and almost impaling him on the right side. Luckily, it didn't happen, but once again, very scary incident. So secure your load. So, Mr. Chair, that completes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Please contact Eric after the meeting if you have any questions regarding his report. And at this time, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the consent agenda. Items 5A through 5R are on the consent agenda, which you received in advance. Does any member of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Please speak now.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, this is John Cross from Queen Creek. Just like to make a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
Thank you.
I'll
Is there
second.
Okay. Who makes the second?
Dave Trimble, Fountain Hills.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Cross and a second from Mr. Trimble. This is also an opportunity for the public to comment on the item. Just to confirm, staff, have we received any written comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have not received any written comments for this item or any other item on the agenda today.
Okay. So not hearing any questions from members, not having any public comments, we have the motion and we have the second. At this time, the staff will do the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Dawn Prince,
Yes.
Jeffrey Barton,
Yes.
Christopher Brady,
Yes.
Chair Andrew Ching,
Vote yes.
Dan Cotterman.
Yes.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes,
Yes.
Jeff Graves.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Julie Cairns.
Aye.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Yes.
Thank you. John Cross.
yes,
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Jessica Mefford Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. Dave Trimble.
Aye.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Bill Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Yes.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed?
Jean Blackman is a yes from Youngtown. I don't think you heard me the first time around on the roll call, please.
Thank you so much, Ms. Blackman. And we have a yes. Anyone
Thank you.
else? Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. We'll now proceed to item 6. While I scroll down the many numbers of consent agenda items we had today. Item number 6 on the agenda is a resolution, to join House America. There's going to be a presentation this afternoon from MAG Human Services Planner 4, Katie Gentry. This item is for recommendation of approval. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for this opportunity to provide an overview of House America and its connections to Pathways Home. Next slide, please. So an overview of my presentation today, I will give you an overview of what is House America, how it connects to Pathways Home, and next steps to move forward. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So what is House America? It is a partnership between the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Interagency Council on Homelessness. The overall arching goals are to rehouse 100,000 households that are experiencing homelessness with a housing first approach, and to add 20,000 units to the development pipeline of affordable housing. These are national goals, and so I will talk through what does that mean locally as well. Next slide, please. So how are we going to do this? Nationally, there's more money available than ever before. We have both American Rescue Plan dollars and other CARES money, as well as federal, state, and local dollars that can be used to build housing. The timeline of House America is from October 1, 2020 through December 31st of 2022. So we've already started working towards these goals and will continue through the end of this year. So far, 87 leaders have joined, including Mesa and the city of Phoenix. And if you all decide to join and recommend, we would be the first council of governments to join moving forward. Next slide, please. So how does this connect to Pathways Home? Next slide, please. Quick look at how it ties. When we passed Pathways Home back in December, we said that we would be taking a regional approach to address homelessness. And we identified that we needed to add 1,225 units of permanent housing, as well as increase coordination among all levels of government. Both of these goals are specifically in Pathways Home and that you are already working to address. And when I go to the next slide, I will talk about how does that relate to our goals of House America. Next slide, please. So we have identified our local goals as rehousing 1,225 households through a housing first approach. So that is in line with our plan with Pathways Home, is that same 1,225 households. And then in addition, identifying adding 300 units to the development pipeline. This is about half of the number of permanent supportive housing units that are needed within the plan. But this also is showing we already have a really tight housing market, and so we need places for some of those households to be rehoused. And we know already that some of your local jurisdictions are doing this and starting to add into this pipeline as we speak. Next slide, please. So what does that mean and next steps? Next slide. We invite you to recommend approval for passing a resolution to join House America with our goals of rehousing 1,225 households and adding 300 units of housing to the development pipeline. Next slide, please. I am happy to answer any questions, as well as you have my contact information as well as Amy's contact information, and I will turn it back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Are there any questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair, just a quick question.
Yes.
This is Jeff in Peoria. First of all, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. It's exciting to hear we will be the first regional entity to really throw our support into this. So I love the concept and I'm certainly supportive of it. Just making sure, is the idea that just we are hoping other different areas and regions of the government and COGS are going to further show their support, or is this to further emphasize Pathways Home has a very consistent number? I'm just kind of curious of the impetus for this. Is it really to get the same messaging and the same goal no matter where someone looks, or is it more about showing ourselves on a national stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Tyne. I would say more the second of we are one of the few that are approaching this from a regional perspective, and do want to definitely acknowledge all of the work that you all are doing, especially on the national scale. I will say, I think these are conservative goals. I think you all are going to blow these goals out of the water. And so really want to show how much you all are doing. We definitely could not address homelessness without y'all's support across the region. And so want to be able to recognize a lot of the work that you all are doing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Hearing none, is there a motion?
This is Jeff, so moved.
Thank you. We have a second?
This is Jeff Barton, I'll second.
Okay, the Jeffs have it. We have a motion from Jeff Tyne and a second from Jeff Barton. Staff, could you please conduct the roll call vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Dawn Prince.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeffrey Barton.
Yes.
Thank you. Jean Blackman.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Brady.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair Andrew Ching.
Sorry, yes.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Yes.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Julie Cairns.
Aye.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Yes.
Thank you. John Cross.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Jessica Mefford Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. Dave Trimble.
Yes.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Bill Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. Bob Wigenroth.
Yes.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 7, State Route 347 Peters and Knoll Road to I-10 Maricopa Scoping Study and PEL. I know we have, we're going to have a presentation from MAG Transportation Policy and Planning Director Tim Stroh. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Management Committee. I'm happy to be with you today to present the results of the State Route 347 scoping study. Our presentation will include background on the study process, walk you through the highest ranked corridor strategies, and wrap up with study recommendations and an implementation plan. Next slide, please. So the study started off in 2019 and was funded by MAG, the City of Maricopa, and Pinal County. The goal of the study was to build stakeholder consensus around a corridor improvement plan for 347 from Interstate 10 to Peters and Knoll Road. The recommendations from this study would then advance to future design environmental work, like what is currently being conducted for the I-10 Wild Horse Pass design concept report that Eric touched on in his director's report. The study also is including a planning environmental linkages process, or PEL, which is intended to lay the groundwork for a more detailed NEPA process in future studies. We created also a stakeholder group that was critical to the success of this project. And it consisted of ADOT, FHWA, Maricopa and Pinal County, City of Maricopa, the Gila River Indian community, and the Ak-Chin Indian community. Next slide. So the study area for this project was about 20 miles long. It's a pretty long corridor. It's a direct route to the Phoenix metro area from the Gila River Indian community, City of Maricopa, and surrounding Pinal County. When we evaluated this project, we broke it into 3 different segments. We have the segment on the north that goes through the Gila River Indian community, so from I-10 to the northern boundary of the City of Maricopa. We have the middle segment, which we consider the middle segment, which is the City of Maricopa, and then the section to the south, which includes the Ak-Chin Indian community. Now, each section has different needs and characteristics. The section to the north that goes across the Gila River Indian community, this section experiences the most travel in the mornings. So this area, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with commuting on 347 during the morning or evening peak hours, but there's a significant amount of traffic that occurs. So there's a lot of residents in the City of Maricopa and surrounding Pinal County that make the morning drive to the Phoenix metro area. I like to picture the issue as picture going north to Flagstaff on I-17 on a holiday weekend on a Friday night, and then add a few traffic signals along the way. There's a few bottlenecks along the corridor. So this northern section, some of the key critical issues that we took a look at were the I-10 State Route 347 traffic interchange, Riggs Road, 4-legged intersection. Riggs Road has been in the newspaper many times. It's a major bottleneck along this corridor, and unfortunately, there's been a lot of traffic accidents, several fatalities. So this was one of the intersection locations we wanted to study in more detail. And then we had 2 T intersections, Cement Plant Access Road and Casablanca Road, which were also evaluated. This section, the north section of 347, right now consists of 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, and is divided by a median, a dirt median today. As you transition in the City of Maricopa, the roadway widens from 4 lanes to 6 lanes. So the needs in the City of Maricopa are a little bit different than the northern section in the Gila River Indian community. The 347 is primarily built out, so they're looking for more spot improvements to help with morning and evening congestion. And then as 347 transitions south of the City of Maricopa into the Ak-Chin Indian community, the roadway again narrows to 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction. Next slide, please. So to start the process, a stakeholder workshop was held early in 2019 where the vision, goals, and objectives were outlined for the study. The stakeholders recognized the need to accommodate forecasted growth, optimize travel speeds and associated travel time, and improve safety. The vision statement identified by stakeholders was to provide a reliable transportation corridor that supports economic development while minimizing environmental impacts. I want to make note that it was recommended by the Gila River Indian community that the corridor improvement plan strategies maintain the current corridor easement to the greatest extent possible. Next slide, please. Having defined the corridor vision and goals and objectives of the study, reviewed opportunities and constraints and recommendations from previous studies, the stakeholders held a workshop that identified over 134 potential corridor and intersection improvement strategies for the 3 different segments along State Route 347. This universe of alternatives was then screened by the stakeholders at the workshop to narrow the list of those that best met the corridor vision, goals, and objectives. Advancing alternatives were then the subject of more detailed screening and conceptual layouts to further define their feasibility and effectiveness. The resulting alternatives consisted of corridor strategies as well as spot improvements at key intersections. Next slide, please. The highest ranked strategies that came out of the analysis and received the most support from the stakeholders was the traditional corridor widening into 6 lanes, where you'd have each one lane in each direction, and then have the signalized intersections remain. The other alternative was a 6-lane Arizona Parkway concept with indirect left turns and signalized intersections. And then the third was widening to include reversible lanes. In addition to the corridor strategies, the stakeholder group recommended a grade separation at Riggs Road and adopting the diverging diamond interchange concept that is recommended as part of the I-10 Wild Horse Pass project for the 347 I-10 traffic interchange. Based on the 2040 modeling results of this study, the reversible lanes and Arizona Parkway concept improves travel time by approximately 20 minutes during the morning commute, where the traditional widening only improved travel time for about 10 minutes. Next slide, please. So I wanted to lay out a little illustration, walk you through the 3 different alternatives, kind of show you what we're recommending. For the traditional corridor widening in the Arizona Parkway, we're recommending adding 1 lane in each direction, widening in the median. We'd also include a concrete barrier to remove those safety issues with crossover accidents. And we'd also include shoulders on both sides of the roadway. The only variation in corridor design would be at the intersections where the left turn movements would be replaced by median U-turns for the Arizona Parkway concept. Next slide, please. So here's an example of the indirect left turn concept. The Arizona Parkway eliminates the left turn movements at signalized intersections and provides a median past the intersections for U-turns. As a result, the Arizona Parkway concept improves overall efficiency of all movements at the intersection, reduces total car crashes by reducing the number of conflict points from 32 to 16. Next slide, please. With the heavy commuter traffic that I mentioned earlier from residents heading north to work in the Phoenix metro area and vice versa in the evening, the reversible lane concept was identified by stakeholders early on in the process to add more capacity during peak travel times. Widening would occur in the median of the roadway and would be separated by a concrete barrier on both sides. The reversible lane concept would require grade separation of the reversible lanes at each intersecting roadway. The 2 outside northbound travel lanes and the 2 outside southbound travel lanes would remain at grade to allow turns to and from the various intersecting roadways along the corridor. This is very similar to what is going to be occurring on the I-17 project here in the near future. Next slide, please. So after we identified the highest ranked alternative strategies, we wanted to get the public's opinion on the highest ranked alternatives. 2 public meetings were held, one at the city of Maricopa and one at the Auction Indian community. In addition to the public meetings, we had an online survey that was hosted on the study website pretty much for the duration of the study. And we passed out hard copies at the public meetings back in 2019 and 2020. The survey was then refined in 2020 based on input from the Gila River Indian community and publicized to the community in late 2020. We wanted to really make sure that we got this study right, make sure that all voices were heard along the corridor, and we really took our time to work with the Gila River Indian community to hear their concerns. A total of 272 responses were received. Next slide, please. In general, the survey responses confirmed that most of the travel that occurs along 347 is over a longer distance. and they're traveling to origin and destinations in the Phoenix metro area. Respondents also believe that while optimizing travel time is most important, safety is also a priority. The survey also indicates that most respondents are supportive of the alternative intersection treatments that we identified, such as the left turn restrictions, grade separations, as well as the reversible lanes concept. We also asked survey respondents to explain what they thought was the greatest need or improvement for the corridor. And overwhelmingly, Riggs Road popped up. I think the overpass at Riggs Road was a foregone conclusion when we started this study. I've had a lot of folks reach out to me, a lot of residents in Pinal County, City of Maricopa, expressing their desires for an overpass at Riggs Road and additional widening north of the City of Maricopa. Next slide, please. So after we finished the performance analysis, coordinate with our stakeholder group and receive public comment on the different recommendations, it was recommended that we move forward with the 6-lane Arizona Parkway concept through the entire corridor, with the exception to the segment south of the City of Maricopa. The Auction Indian community wanted to see, they would like to first pump the brakes on the recommendations for either traditional widening or Arizona Parkway. They wanted to see how this section of 347 would develop in the future and to leave it up to future study. So the main recommendation would be Arizona Parkway north of the City of Maricopa. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, through the City of Maricopa, it's primarily already built out to 6 lanes. But the City of Maricopa would identify in future study spot improvements to include the indirect left turn movements at key intersections to help improve congestion in the AM and PM peak hour. Next slide, please. Stakeholder group also recommended that we adopt the recommendations from the I-10 Wild Horse Pass study and include a diverging diamond interchange design for the I-10 interchange. It was also recommended that we move forward, like I said before, with the Riggs Road grade separation, and we incorporate the Arizona Parkway or high T intersection concepts at Cement Plant Access Road and Casablanca Road. Next slide, please. So the good news is that we finally have some funding identified in the future for improvements along the 347. We have funding set aside in the current Prop 400 program for the I-10 347 improvements as part of the ongoing I-10 Wild Horse Pass study. So that's good news. So that's a near-term improvement. We've identified funding from, you see the light green line on 347 from I-10 to Riggs Road. We've identified funding in the Prop 400 Extension Investment Program for improvements along that section of roadway. ADOT is currently making improvements to Old Maricopa Road 347 right now. They're constructing a high T intersection, which is similar to an Arizona Parkway concept in regards to allows the T part, the high part of the T to continually flow through the intersection, which reduces the amount of green time for other movements. Riggs Road, the state ADOT received a $35 million appropriation last year to construct a Riggs Road overpass. That project currently is starting the design and environmental phase. That just kicked off, so that's great news. Riggs Road's a major bottleneck along this corridor. And then the section, the purple section to the south, Pinal Regional Transportation Authority passed a 20-year sales tax for transportation back in 2017. They identified around $30 million for improvements along that corridor. Unfortunately, on March 8th, the Arizona Supreme Court invalidated the voter-approved tax. So moving forward, if PRTA does go back to the voters and they are successful, funding will be programmed again for this section of 347. Next slide, please. So I mentioned before, during the presentation, this is a high-level scoping study. Truly intended to bring the stakeholders to the table and rally around a vision that we can move forward for future study as funding becomes available, to be quite honest. FHWA and ADOT have already shown their support for the study and have signed the Pell statement. And at the conclusion of the MAG committee process, MAG Executive Director Eric Anderson will sign the Pell and finalize the Pell statement. Like I said, there's a lot of good momentum occurring on this corridor. We're excited about the future. Mr. Chair, members of the management committee, that completes my presentation. I'd happy to answer any questions. And as a reminder, this is on the agenda for action.
Thank you very much for your presentation. At this time, I would ask, are there any comments or questions for staff? Okay, hearing none. Entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Chair, John Cross from Queen Creek, I'll move for approval.
Thank you, John. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Jill Kymack, and it was an excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a second, a motion for Mr. Cross and a second for Ms. Kymack. This time staff will take the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Dawn Prince.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeffrey Barton.
Yes.
Thank you. Jean Blackman.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Brady.
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman.
Yes.
Thank you. Crystal Dykes.
Yes.
Thank you. Lisa Garcia, Jeff Graves.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Julie Cairns.
Aye.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Yes.
Thank you. John Cross.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Jessica Mefford Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. Dave Trimble.
Aye.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Yes.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Bill Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Yes.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Andrew Ching.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Is there anyone that I missed? Mr. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Thank you. At this time, we'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, air quality update. Presentation today will be from MAG Environmental Director Tim Franquist.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. There's no shortage of air quality topics, so I'll try to keep this focused on air quality trends in the region, and then a handful of regulatory actions that are coming along with those. Next slide, please. I think it's important really to start off with a really good story about air quality, because I don't think a day goes by where you don't read about a bad news story about air quality. In fact, today when I came in, opened up my browser, I got the high pollution advisory. But the story is actually a lot better than I think we often hear, in that while our economics is growing, our populations are growing, vehicles miles traveled is growing, our actual air pollution, both as a national trend and as a state trend, and there is actually a similar chart of this of the region, it all tells the same story, is that with all that growth, we still actually see a lot of decreases in air pollution overall. Next slide, please. However, we do have our challenges with air quality. What I got denoted here is a map of the non-attainment area boundaries. And so under the Clean Air Act, we have the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. These are the federal standards for 6 air quality pollutants that's regulated under the Clean Air Act. What we can see over here on the right is the different pollutants that MAG is designated for planning. So that's ozone, particulate matter 10, which is a dust-sized particle, particulate matter 2.5, which is about a smoke-sized particle, then carbon monoxide. And what we can see here in the map is that that we have several of these pollutants for non-attainment areas, ozone probably being the most problematic. PM10 was an issue the early part of the 2000s, and I think a great testament to all the work that your jurisdictions have done, all the great work that the business community has done. this is an issue that it seems to be behind us, at least here in Maricopa County. Pinal County, there's a small portion there that is having some PM10 challenges, but we just submitted a plan that the regional councils approved. That we're confident that we'll actually bring that area back into attainment. One item that I think also note here is contributors to air pollution include meteorology, so our climate and weather certainly play a part in that. Our topography, so mountains, oceans, big flat land masses impact air quality. And then of course the emission sources, both natural and human, are the three kind of primary impacts to air pollution. Next slide, please. And we'll talk a little bit about ground level ozone. This often gets confused with stratospheric ozone, which is the good ozone. So we're going to talk real quickly about what's called ground level or tropospheric ozone, and that's the ozone that is bad for your health. So let's move to the next slide, please. And so what we got displayed here is the air quality trend since 2000. Some really interesting things to note about this trend here is the blue line actually denotes air quality trends as we're experiencing them. So that's the air we breathe is the blue line. The red line actually denotes potential wildfire impacts in the area. And what you can see there is the wildfire impacts are significant. We believe that recently wildfire impacts could have impacted us anywhere from about 4 to 5 parts per billion. That's the kind of little whisker here that you see there in the red. But I think it's important to also talk a bit about that blue line, which is the air we breathe. I know anybody in the air quality regulatory and planning realm every year gets a little uncomfortable when we hear the American Lung Association report come out, because the urban areas tend not to get good grades. There's a reason. I think we see with this blue line here that we're seeing actual increases in ozone where we weren't seeing that in other years. So that's in part by wildfires, and we'll have a slide in a second. We'll talk a little bit about international transport, but we are getting pollution from outside the area. And so that's a bit alarming, I think, for any kind of air quality professional in our region is we should see kind of the red line being the normal trend line if we're doing a line of best fit. And in fact, we're actually seeing things trend a different way. Next slide, please. And just to kind of put a bit finer point on the data, what we see here are the monitors from the different counties throughout Arizona. And then the top graph that we can see here are really associated with our region. So the top one is Maricopa County, and just below that are the Gila and Pinal County monitors. Those monitors are actually located close to the Phoenix Mesa non-attainment area, so that it trends with, I believe, really the metropolitan area. But I think what part that stands out the most is we can see from the other monitors in the county, things are decreasing, just like we see on the state and national trend. Over here to the right, we can actually see a printout of overall ozone trends nationally. So we can see that's a downward trend as well. So a lot of us are scratching our heads. We're working with Maricopa County Air Quality Department, Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, and they both partnered with ASU to do some air quality studies to try to figure out exactly what's going on in the region. So a lot more to come on this, but I think this is a bit alarming to see that this trend is upticking here. And we don't have a great explanation at this time. Next slide, please. And so what does all that actually mean? So from a regulatory standpoint, as we discussed earlier, the red line that we saw on ozone, those are data that we can exclude from a planning perspective. Since we can't control wildfires, the Clean Air Act does allow us to do what's called an exceptional event. But even with those exceptional events, we don't attain for the 2015 ozone standard. And so while this slide, I apologize, is a bit dense, this is really kind of the cornerstone of ozone regulation. And what this represents is the Clean Air Act's non-attainment classifications for the different levels of ozone non-attainment. So we are currently in marginal for the 2015 standard. We're actually in moderate for the 2008 standard, but we have just attained that standard. So I think we're mostly concerned about marginal, since that was the most active standard that we're dealing with. And we just got notice from EPA that they are looking to bump the region up to moderate. What you can see there is that the regulatory scheme does change. It does get more strict. I think the key piece to really bring out here is reasonable assurance control technology or reasonable available control technologies, RACT, is required at moderate. So whether or not it actually helps you attain the standard, it's now required. Reasonable available control measures, that does help advance attainment. And we may be looking at new measures this time around, just because the measures that we have in place have done a fantastic job over the last several decades. But with this 2015 standard, it is a lot more challenging to meet that with existing measures. So there is a likelihood that we will have to look at additional control measures to bring us into attainment. I think the real key piece for the economy on this is to look at the graph that we have, or excuse me, the chart that we have to the right. What this shows are permitting thresholds for what is referred to as major sources. So these would be very large sources, right now over 100 tons per year. So that's what you'll see in that middle column is the major source threshold. So in America, and in our area as well, a company would have to get an air quality permit before they can actually locate in a certain area. And to get an air quality permit, you have to actually, you can't even engage in binding contracts. So this is kind of the first step in a company locating to our area. And so for a new source, being a non-attainment can be a challenge, because what we can see in here is the NSR offsets. These are the permitting offsets required for a new company to come in the area. And to the far right of that chart, we can see the major modifications. That is a threshold if an existing company makes a change of emissions threshold over that, that would trigger these offsets. The reason I bring that up is right now the area is very scarce in emission offsets, unlike places like Texas or California, which were heavily industrialized. They have a lot of these emission offsets to go around. The Phoenix Mesa area doesn't have almost any to go around. So what that means is for a new major source to locate in the area, it's very, very, very difficult for them to do that. Intel just recently went through this experience with an expansion. They triggered this offset requirement. And as you can see, as we go up through these tiers, those offset requirements actually increase. So we'll be increasing our offset requirements from 1.15, or excuse me, 1.1 to 1.15. Major source threshold doesn't change, nor does the major modification. But I think what I would highlight here is the reason we're talking about potential new controls in the area. I think it's absolutely imperative that we do everything we can to avoid this serious non-attainment status. That's going to be the next classification up. Really, things begin to change drastically there. As you can see, the major source threshold changes, the major modification threshold changes, and the offsets change again. I think what I would note there is we go from a traditionally very large source under moderate non-attainment. So things like a coal-fired power plant is a source of around 100 tons, a cement plant, so very, very large sources. We hit that serious non-attainment. Now we're talking about, middle of the road type facilities. Most facilities would fall right into about that 50-ton category, and major modifications fall into 25 is significant as well. So I think the long story short is that not only is non-attainment bad for public health, but it can be very bad for our local economies. And so again, as we discuss new control measures, I think it's just important to understand what we're ultimately trying to do is protect public health and ensure that we don't go to the next level of non-attainment reclassification. A couple other things to just highlight as we move into the next stage, as EPA's implementation rule also requires is to potentially look outside the non-attainment area to control sources that could be impacting the non-attainment area. We don't have a lot of guidance on what that spatial distance is. Is that 50 miles, 100 miles, is that California? We simply don't know. But if we can't make an attainment demonstration here, we would have to then potentially work with the state to look at emission controls outside. As mentioned before, offsets increase. The other piece here too is we will now have to be looked for contingency measures. And contingency measure is a control measure that is not implemented. So it's one that we have kind of in hip pocket should we not attain the standard. So again, kind of in a nutshell, things are kind of changes drastically from a planning and regulatory standpoint as we move into moderate. And so I think everything that we can do as a region to bring our emission sources down would behoove us as we try to avoid that serious non-attainment status. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about international transport. So as I was saying previously, certainly wildfires impact our region, but also emissions from East Asia and Mexico. So what we can see here in the left side graphic is a animation of just a single day, but we have several of these satellite pictures showing ozone transport across the Pacific and up through Mexico. The Clean Air Act does give us an opportunity. It's what's called a but-for demonstration, an international transport demonstration. And what that simply says is that we would attain the standard but-for emissions emanating from outside the country. I think that makes sense. Obviously, we cannot control emissions from somewhere else. We have two options to do that. One's a retrospective analysis. We would have attained a standard but-for, or we will attain a standard but-for those emissions. For this round on moderate, again, because we're going to be looking to do everything we can to demonstrate attainment, we're likely going to be looking at a prospective international transport because we do believe we are significantly impacted. EPA's own modeling shows somewhere around 2 parts per billion impact in our area. Our own study shows somewhere around 7 in a high year, so somewhere between 2 and 7 ppb of ozone emissions are related to international transport. So we'll certainly be digging into that and seeing what we can do to account for international transport. Next slide, please. We'll talk a bit about particulate matter 10. And this is usually referred to a dust-sized particle. Next slide, please. And the story's starting to get a lot better from here. So as most folks have been in the Valley, we know the brown cloud days are behind us. It's, again, a huge testament to all the work that each jurisdiction has done, each business in those jurisdictions have done. What we can see here are the number of exceedances in a single year. We're allowed 3 in a 3-year period. A 4th exceedance of the standard will also trigger a non-attainment. What we can see here, mainly in the gray, are, again, exceptional events. So anybody that's lived here for any length of time has seen our dust events, the very, very large dust events. And that's what's denoted here. Again, we can do exceptional events for those dust events, exclude those from the data. And so what this really shows is that the control measures in the region are working. They are doing their job, and they continue to reduce dust pollution. Next slide, please. Particulate matter 2.5. This one is more of a recreational issue. Next slide, please. We'll jump into the data. What we can see here is, again, if anybody's spending time in the Valley, they know that during the holiday seasons, both between recreational burns and fireworks, we actually do see some smoke increase in the Valley. What I've denoted here is right now with the current standard, 12 micrograms per cubic meter, we're doing just fine. We're relatively plateaued. What we see here in red is the Clean Air Act Science Advisory Committee. This is a group that works alongside the EPA to make recommendations on standards. CASAC is the acronym for them. CASAC is making a recommendation to change the PM 2.5 standard from somewhere between 8 to 10 micrograms per cubic meter. And as what we can see in red is if they pick the higher end, we still should be fine, though we're getting a lot closer to the standard, probably uncomfortably close. If they go with the lower standard, we'd actually be in non-attainment for PM 2.5. So this is something we're watching very, very closely for the annual standard. We're good right now, but this could change drastically depending on what the EPA decides to do with this. Next slide, please. This is also for the daily standard, the PM 2.5. EPA is also looking to reconsider this standard. Again, we're just fine on the current daily standard at 35 micrograms per cubic meter. But again, EPA or CASAC is proposing a range to EPA of 25 to 30. Again, if we're at 30, we look to be good, though we're trending upward. And if they pick the 25, we would be non-attainment for PM 2.5. So again, I think the story around this is anything we can do to curtail recreational burns, certainly fireworks. I know that's kind of a sacred thing around the holidays, but it is definitely impacting air quality. And going forward, if these standards change to the lower end, that could actually cause a serious regulatory issue for us here in the Valley. So something to keep an eye on. And when we start getting into the No Burn campaign, Clean Burn Better campaigns, I think it's really important for us all to join in on that and really get the word out that this smoke does really, really impact the Valley. Next slide, please. And then carbon monoxide. Next slide, please. I think we can end this one on a very good story. So with all new standards, it's pretty common for folks to scratch their head and say, hey, how are we going to get from here to there? It's next to impossible. I think carbon monoxide is that same story, starting in the early 80s. This was a standard that most folks thought would never be complied with. What we can see here is, again, a great testament to a lot of emission reductions, mainly from vehicles and certain stationary sources. But we can see here over time, things have plateaued a little bit, but this has been a drastic decrease in carbon monoxide emissions. So I think as we look at new standards and we do start to hear some concern, how are we going to get from here to there? Carbon monoxide, I think, is a great story, is that we can do it. It takes a lot of effort on everybody's part. But I think here we can end kind of on a good news story that we can step up to these challenges as a region, take them on, and be successful. Next slide, please. And with that, Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions from the committee? Hearing none, we will close agenda item number 8. Thank you again. We will now proceed to agenda item number 9, which is election of officers. Each June, the positions of chair and vice chair are elected by the management committee according to the MAG committee operating policies and procedures approved by the MAG Regional Council. The chair works with members to nominate a manager for the vice chair position, and the current vice chair is nominated for the position of chair. The positions serve 1-year terms. Does any member of the management committee have any questions? Based on the input I've received prior to the meeting, we will now proceed with a motion to elect Jeff Tyne from Peoria as the new chair and Chris Brady from Mesa as vice chair. Is there any discussion on the motion? At this time, would someone like to make that motion to elect the chair and the vice chair?
Thank you, Andrew. This is Julie.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. This is Julie in Goodyear, and I would like to move that Jeff Tyne be appointed chair and Chris Brady be appointed vice chair. Thank you.
Very good. Julie Cairns from Goodyear has made the motion. Is there a second?
This is Dawn
by
Prince
Jean
from
Blackman in
Gilbert.
Youngtown.
I'd like to make a second.
Okay. We have a motion from Julie and a second from Dawn to approve the new chair and vice chair of Jeff Tyne, chair, and Chris Brady as vice chair. At this time, we'll call the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I will go down the list of members participating virtually. Please unmute and indicate how you vote. Dawn Prince.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeffrey Barton.
Yes.
Thank you. Jean Blackman.
Yes.
Thank you. Christopher Brady.
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Cotterman. Dan Cotterman. Crystal Dykes.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Graves.
Yes.
Thank you. Jennifer Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you. Julie Cairns.
Aye.
Thank you. Jill Kymack.
Yes.
Thank you. John Cross.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Kulaga.
Yes.
Thank you. Jessica Mefford Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. Dave Trimble.
Aye.
Thank you. Gary Neese.
Yes.
Thank you. Charlene Pania.
Aye.
Thank you. Kevin Phelps.
Aye.
Thank you. Matt Busby.
Aye.
Thank you. Bill Murphy.
Yes.
Thank you. Jeff Tyne.
Yes.
Thank you. Matthew Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. Bob Wingenroth.
Yes.
Thank you. Joshua Wright.
Aye.
Thank you. And Chair Andrew Ching.
Thank you. I vote aye as well.
Yes, and thank you. Did I miss anyone? Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Congratulations to Mr. Tyne and to Mr. Brady. Normally, if we were here meeting in person, I would symbolically pass an actual gavel, perhaps, to you, Jeff, and all of that. But we will dispense with some of that pomp and circumstance, and just know that you will start as the chair at our next scheduled meeting, which I believe is in August. But I also understand that the practice of this committee is that I get to finish this meeting. So if you'll indulge me for a little bit longer, I will move through the rest of the agenda. So thank you.
I will. If, real quick, if I may, Andrew, just a quick comment regarding your leadership with this group. I just wanted to mention you've just done an exceptional job navigating us through finishing out Prop 400E, and then also as we initiated the Pathways Home, leading us through that with the unenviable job of doing that most of the time virtually. It was never easy. I just also want to mention personally my appreciation of all of your effort in stewardship on all things issued housing, accessibility, and homelessness that you've done for a number of years. And it sure was prescient just in time as that has now become the national issue for all of us to deal with. So thank you so much for all of your leadership over this period.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Jeff. I really appreciate that. I will take the time now, as long as we're speaking about this, to express my appreciation for MAG staff who help me on a monthly basis to be ready for this meeting. And they're excellent. As all of you know, the quality of the staff and the work that they do is just outstanding. And Eric, I appreciate your leadership with this group, and I couldn't do what I've been asked to do over the last year without all of them working together. And I thank you. The things that I care about, I know that this region cares about. We all have many similar things that we deal with. We are much more united as a region by the things that we work on together than the things that make us different. And I think that's a real hallmark of the leadership of MAG and why we believe in regional solutions on so many important issues of the day. And I'm committed to that. And I know you, Jeff, the kind of person you are, the kind of leader you are, this organization and this committee is in really great hands, and there's no one else I'd rather hand off to than you. So thank you for agreeing to step up and to work in that capacity. Thank you.
So, thank you. I should mention that your staff has also put together a very nice plaque in appreciation of your dedicated service. Beyond this virtual one, you'll get an actual one relatively soon. So thank you again.
Oh, it's very nice. Maybe they'll include today's box lunch in the package as well. We'll see.
That's awesome.
I asked for Fritos. We'll see.
That's all you
Okay.
ask.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Congratulations to the new officers. And we will now move on to item 10, which is legislative update from MAG Policy and Government Relations Director Nathan Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the MAG Management Committee. We continue our focus, obviously, on Senate Bill 1356, the enabling legislation for continuation of the half-cent sales tax for transportation in Maricopa County. Just by way of reminder, of course, earlier in session, we did see passage in the Senate of 1356 with the emergency clause intact. As we've reported in recent months, we remain in a waiting in the House, where we need 40 votes by House members to retain the emergency clause. And again, another reminder, why do we need an emergency clause? That's necessary to call a November 2022 ballot. So if our bill remains effectively on hold, especially pending ongoing budget discussions, we are looking at a June 25th due date with the county to call a November 22 ballot. So in this time frame coming up against June 25th, of course, the legislature would need to pass 1356, and the governor would need to sign that in order for the county to call the ballot. So again, June 25th being the due date there. We continue to coordinate with the business community and our member agencies, government relations staff. So thank you for that. And as I noted, with the June 25th deadline approaching, we are staying the course on 1356, but we're also prudently reviewing potential alternatives. We're working to set up a discussion with our policymakers. Given the time constraints, that will probably be our executive committee. I should note too that there are legal considerations involved in reviewing alternatives.
which limit discussion in an open meeting setting. But with pending policy direction, we'll notify our member agencies accordingly as to the direction in which we proceed. So with that, more to come. Again, thank you to our member agencies, our elected officials, our managers and government relations staff. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Nathan. Are there any questions? Okay. Hearing none, thanks again for the presentation. We will close item 10 and we'll move to item 11 on the agenda, request for future agenda items, topics of or issues of interest the management committee would like to have considered for discussion at a future meeting will be requested at this time. Are there any from the committee? Okay. Hearing none, we'll close item 11. This time, item 12, comments from the committee. We provide an opportunity at this time for management committee members to present a brief summary of current events. We're not allowed to propose, discuss, deliberate, or take action at the meeting on any matter in the summary unless the specific matter is properly noticed for legal action. Are there any comments from the committee at this time? Okay. Hearing none, we'll close item 12. And with no further business, this meeting of the MAG Management Committee is adjourned at 1:06 p.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Take care, everyone.